Well, today I want to read an excerpt from Ramanujacharya about consciousness. I don't like the word consciousness itself because this word has a long tradition in the West, in Western languages, both in the area, in the field of psychology and in the field of philosophy, and even moral philosophy. But normally people use to translate chit as consciousness. So let us keep it for the moment. And Ramanujacharya trying to refute the Advaitic perspective on consciousness, that consciousness is always self-luminous. All the time consciousness reveals itself. He makes the following comment. Consciousness is not self-luminous always and to everybody, but it is self-luminous only when it reveals objects and not at other times, and it is so only to a particular knower and not to everyone. For we remember past states of our consciousness and also infer the states of consciousness in others from their conduct, as for example, whether they are well disposed or ill disposed towards us. This is a long commentary, but what is important here is Advaitins, and they have their own philosophical arguments for this. They say that consciousness is always self-luminous, which means it's always self-evident by itself. I always felt that this creates a lot of confusion in people's minds because consciousness is not self-luminous when we sleep, when there are no objects. And also, other people's consciousness are not self-evident to everyone. Now, there could be a case, like in the case of the Brahman himself, in which he is always self-evident to himself. And this is according to many different philosophical traditions, because God knows himself or herself constantly and completely and fully by the very self-evidence of his perfect consciousness. Now, this is not the case for us. You see, maybe in meditation we could reach this kind of consciousness which is self-evident. But this is an expansion of consciousness in our case. It's not there all the time. And people could say, no, it's there all the time, but we don't notice it, which it's a kind of consciousness, unconscious of its self-consciousness. So it's very tricky argument. So I love the way Ramanujacharya puts this, like consciousness is dependent on the self and not the other way around. So the kind of consciousness is always associated with one particular self, and the discussion about what is the self is another discussion. But this is just to show that there are different opinions, and I have been engaged in in bringing about this kind of different perspective, because Advaitic philosophy is very, even though it's a very high philosophy, and it's a particular philosophy. You see, it's not the whole philosophy. And some people say they sort it out by saying that no, Advaitic is superior philosophy, and maybe it is, maybe it is not. This is what they say about themselves, but there are different perspectives to that. See, it's not the only perspective about even about the Vedas, and there are many arguments also against Advaitic thought. So the whole Vedic tradition is not about Advaita Vedanta, especially in its particular Shankarian form. And of course, the Supreme is always non dual. Nobody doubts that in any kind of philosophy. So nobody's saying that the Supreme is just one element in a duality. Of course, the Supreme, the self consciousness, the self thought of the Supreme is perfect by itself, and it has always been like this, and it will keep being like this forever. But as regarding human beings, things are, deserve another treatment, another kind of approach. Otherwise, people get a little bit confused and they mix up many different levels. This is my humble opinion about it.